Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Our world has 200-odd countries. All of them make news, some more than the others, but all of them do. There are wars, famines, protests, scientific breakthroughs, legal battles, lots of power, and politics and power games. It's never a dull day, as they say. Every morning when we look at the news list, we want to pick stories that impact your lives the most. Stories that define our present and shape our future. Somehow one country tends to dominate the list. Its impact on our world is increasingly, disproportionately and worryingly immense. It's the same country that has locked up more than 1 million people and laid death traps for sovereign nations, has exported the virus and hijacked the World Health Organization. Tonight we'll talk about another horrid gift from China. Global inflation and food shortage. China is hoarding grains. It is home to 20% of the world's population but has stockpiled more than 50% of the world's food supplies. What explains this? Why is China doing it? And are prices set to rise further in your country because of this? We'll discuss all of it also on the show. As the Russia-Ukraine standoff continues, Vladimir Putin holds his annual press conference and sets the terms of engagement with the West. We'll tell you what he said. In India, it's raining unicorns. With $33 billion companies added this year, India has displaced the UK to occupy the third spot in the unicorn race. As the Omicron surge continues, the debate on boosters is intensifying. Who should take it and when? The WHO's confused messaging is not helping. And will 5G delay or cancel hundreds of thousands of flights every year? American airline companies have raised concerns. 5G service providers say they're fear-mongering. We'll discuss. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Preliminary data from 3 studies show that the Omicron variant is less likely to land patients in the hospital than the Delta variant. Studies from the United Kingdom and South Africa, which are yet to be peer-reviewed, suggest that Omicron may be substantially less likely in severe outcomes than Delta. Monument at Hong Kong University, which commemorates the Tiananmen Square massacre, was removed by workers. Known as the Pillar of Shame, the monument symbolizes the lives lost during the bloody crackdown on pro-democracy protesters on June 4th in 1989. Belgium will shut down all its nuclear reactors by 2025, but will not close the door on new generation nuclear technology. The target of 2025 is one that the current government has been aiming to achieve since October 2020. India marks another milestone in its vaccination drive, as 60% of the population is now fully vaccinated against COVID-19. India's health ministry lauded efforts of healthcare workers and medical professionals across the nation. Chinese officials warn that there is a high probability of COVID-19 outbreaks inside the Winter Olympics bubble, adding that they had drawn up emergency plans. The Winter Games in February are set to be the most restrictive mass sporting event since the pandemic began. The Ethiopian government claims that its soldiers have recaptured a city in southern Tigray from Tigrayan fighters, making its first major advance inside the war-torn region in many months. Myanmar rescuers found 2 more bodies at a jade mine after officials conceded that there was little hope of finding survivors among scores buried by an avalanche of dirt and rubble, while searching for fragments of the gems. The death toll from a shipwreck off the coast of Madagascar has now risen to 85. Authorities say that 138 people were on the boat, which was carrying cargo and sank on Monday. Investigations into the accident suggest that the vessel's engine had a technical problem. Liverpool have set up an EFL Cup semi-final against Arsenal with a thrilling victory over Leicester City. A rotated Reds side fell behind 2-0 and then 3-1, but rallied to level at 3-all and then prevailed in a penalty shootout. Elsewhere, Tottenham ended West Ham United's giant killing run with a 2-1 win, and they will now face Chelsea, who beat Brentford 2-0. The United States men's cricket team have created history with a stunning 26-run T20 win over Ireland, their first against a full member nation. 50s from Sushant Modani and Gajanand Singh saw the hosts recover from 16 for 4 to post a formidable total of 188 for 6. Their bowlers then restricted Ireland to 162 for 6 to seal a famous victory.
Have you been complaining about the growing inflation? Have your monthly expenses gone up? Are you now paying more for your daily essentials, things like rice, cooking oil, pulses and more? If you are, you're not alone. It's happening across the world. In India, for instance, inflation has jumped. In Sri Lanka, there is a food shortage. In Nepal, inflation has touched a 19-month high. In Bangladesh, inflation is breaking records. In the month of November, it touched a 5-year high. And in Pakistan, food inflation is crushing the poor. Like I said, price rise is hurting everyone, everywhere in the world. The whole of South Asia, for instance, is struggling with inflation. It's happening due to a combination of domestic and international factors. But I'm not going to discuss that tonight. I'm here to tell you that this inflation will get worse because of one country, China. China is adding to global inflation. How? By hoarding the world's grain. How much? More than half of the global supply. China is hoarding more than half of the global supply of food grains. This includes maize and grains, other grains. China represents less than 20% of the world's population, but it has a stockpile that can feed more than 50% of the planet. China's mass hoarding is causing a global price rise. It is also pushing countries into famine. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you about the dangerous fallout of China's mass hoarding. First, let's tell you what China is doing. How much food supply is Beijing hoarding? Let's give you some numbers. Estimates say China has 69% of the world's maize reserves, 60% of the rice reserves, and 51% of the wheat reserves. Going by one report, China's food supplies are at a quote-unquote historically high level. And it's just one Chinese state-owned enterprise that is building the stockpile. It's called the COFCO Group, COFCO. This is a major food processing company. The COFCO Group runs one of China's largest food stockpiling bases. It is in Dalian, in northeast China. It's a port. It has 310 huge silos. They store beans and grains supplied from within China and abroad. From here, the port of Dalian, China distributes food to the rest of the country. You could say the COFCO Group is critical for China's food security. But for the rest of us, it's a threat. Because this mass hoarding of food in China is impacting the world. Let me show you how. Number one, food prices are rising across the world. They have jumped by 30% in a year. These are numbers from November this year. They were compiled by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. Number two, the hoarding is pushing countries into famine. Again, we have some numbers from the United Nations. In 2020, 700 million people were living in famine-like conditions. In recent years, these numbers have gone up by 100 million. So more people are starving now. Experts in Japan are blaming the Chinese for this. Let me tell you what one of them said, and I'm quoting. Although developed nations as a whole are responsible for famine, China's responsibility is heavier. China should contribute to resolving the maldistribution of food. Now, this should not come as a surprise. When one country takes up more than 50% of the world's supply, what do you expect? The question is, why is China hoarding? Why are they doing it? And to understand that, you have to flip the pages of history. The Communist Party of China is paranoid about food security. It's because of this man, Mao Zedong, the founder of modern-day China, also the brain behind one of the biggest man-made disasters in human history. In 1958, Mao Zedong proposed the Great Leap Forward. This was China's second five-year plan, the Great Leap Forward. Mao Zedong wanted to industrialize the Chinese economy, and he wanted to do it quickly. He ended up ruining it. He reorganized China's population into communes, and they were forced to drop everything else and make steel in their backyards. Regular people, everyone basically. Farm work was stopped. Pots and pans were confiscated. The result was a massive famine, one that is said to have killed as many as 45 million people. Things were so bad that people ate human flesh from dead bodies to survive, according to some accounts. The famine ended after 1962, but the horrid memories still live on. More than 50 years later, Mao's Great Leap still haunts the Communist Party of China. It cannot afford food shortages of any kind. The last 2 years have been challenging, though. Several reports have indicated a shortage of food. Speculation began with a speech from Xi Jinping. Last year, remember, the Chinese president announced what he called Operation Empty Plate. On the face of it, this campaign was meant to end food wastage, to avoid excessive consumption, which should be good. But behind the scenes, the Communist Party was basically conducting a crackdown. Restaurants started limiting the number of orders they took. Chefs were encouraged to serve smaller portions. Mukbang videos were attacked by Chinese state mouthpieces. What is mukbang? Videos of people binge eating large quantities of food. This kind of videos were quite famous in China at one point. Millions tuned in to watch, but the government attacked them. The people of China saw all of this as a sign. They joined the dots. They started panic buying. Chinese citizens rushed to supermarkets. Shelves ran out of food. People feared that there was going to be a food shortage. Beijing cannot afford another panic situation like this, so it is hoarding food supplies and maintaining surplus stock, even if it contributes to global hunger. This food stock is basically like an insurance policy against a bigger crisis. The Chinese economy, we know, is going through some tough times. Unemployment exploded in China last year. As of April 2020, more than 200 million Chinese workers were unable to find jobs. China's biggest vehicle of growth is stuttering, that is exports. Chinese factories are going bankrupt. 460,000 of them have been closed recently. But the bigger worry is failing debts. They could start a major economic crisis in China. This month, Evergrande officially defaulted on its debts. Evergrande, we know, is the world's most indebted property developer. It owes more than $300 billion to its creditors. And the crisis is not limited to Evergrande in China. Other property developers owe $5 trillion. $5 trillion. Besides Evergrande, at least 4 more developers have defaulted. The property sector is very big in China. It represents 30% of the country's economy. If it collapses, it will affect every major sector. Banks will struggle since they won't be able to recover the loans they gave to these property developers. Construction activity could slow down, even come to a halt. And this would have a direct impact on job creation. You see, everything is linked. Long story short, China has its plate full of problems. The last thing the Communist Party wants is a food shortage, which is why it is hoarding food supplies so that it can maintain internal stability. This is an artificially created crisis. The sole purpose of this hoarding is to protect the Communist Party of China, not the people of China. Make no mistake. And the rest of the world is paying the price for Beijing's insurance against its own mistakes. Do you know what's special about this week? It's Christmas. So how about a good old Christmas story? The year is 1991. The day is December 25th, Christmas Day. Most of the world was snuggled up at home, but in Moscow, an empire was collapsing. On Christmas Day in 1991, the Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin. The new Russian flag replaced it. 30 years have passed since then. The Soviet empire is dead and buried, but its ghosts continue to linger. 2 former Soviet nations are on the brink of war, Russia and Ukraine. It's basically a battle for influence. Russian President Vladimir Putin wants his country to dominate Ukraine, but Ukraine wants to ally with the West. The result is this, a massive military standoff. How many soldiers are we talking about? There's no official count, but here's what intelligence reports say. Russia has deployed around 100,000 troops. 75,000 more are on standby, we are told. On the other side, Ukraine has amassed 125,000 troops. Remember, this is all happening in peak Russian winter. What about firepower? Equally devastating. Russia has moved tanks, artillery and air defense systems to the border, and they're ready and awaiting orders. So what's their commander-in-chief thinking? Well, Vladimir Putin is a tough man to read. He doesn't give away very much. Earlier this month, he held virtual talks with US President Joe Biden. Their agenda was quite simple: prevent a war. I know that's a low bar for any meeting, but on the flip side, lower the bar, lower the expectations. President Putin wants certain security guarantees from the US. Basically, he has a wish list. Let me tell you what's on it. Putin's wish list. Number one, stay out of Ukraine, which means NATO must not offer membership to Kiev. Number two, NATO must retreat from Eastern Europe. So no weapons, no troops, no NATO military presence in Eastern Europe. Putin would also like something to sweeten the deal, maybe an all clear for the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Germany's new government is not keen on this project. Some European countries are also threatening to block it. Moscow wants Joe Biden to grease the wheels a bit, get the pipeline up and running. So that's Putin's wish list. But will the West agree? I know it's Christmas, but nobody is that generous. The US has called some of these demands unacceptable. Nonetheless, they've agreed to talks. Reports say the first round will begin next month, in the month of January. And that in itself is a small win for Russia. But President Putin is not satisfied. His demand is quite clear. Give us the guarantees and we back off.
Our actions will depend not on the negotiation process, but on the unconditional security of Russia, today and in the historical perspective. In this regard, we have made it clear, and explicitly so, that further NATO movement eastward is unacceptable. What is unclear? Is it us who places the missiles near USA borders? No, it was the USA who came with its missiles to our house. They're on the doorstep of our house.
What is Joe Biden's play here? Does he even have one? Biden is threatening major sanctions on Russia. He could cripple the Russian economy. But what if the sanctions do not work? Is there a plan B? You could say plan B is military support. This year, America has given Ukraine $450 million in military aid. They're training Ukrainian soldiers. They're supplying anti-tank missiles. But what about boots on the ground? Will Joe Biden send American soldiers to Ukraine, to another war? So far, he has rejected this idea, but Washington has made one thing quite clear. If Russia invades, then NATO will intensify its presence in Eastern Europe. Exactly what Putin does not want. So Biden's game plan is to raise the stakes, make it impractical for Russia to invade Ukraine. It's a classic stalemate. What Russia wants, America cannot give. And what America wants, Russia doesn't want to give. Caught in the middle is the so-called prize, the sovereign nation of Ukraine. Their president, Volodymyr Zelensky, is not backing down. He wants to ally with the West. He wants a time frame for joining the NATO. And that is precisely what Putin hates. The Russian president says he wants good relations with Ukraine, but with the current government, he says, it is impossible.
What is the problem for us? We want to build good neighbors' relations with Ukraine, and we are ready to pay any price, ready for everything. But how can we build such relations with the current Ukrainian authorities, taking into account what they're doing? It's almost impossible. But we are ready to work with those political powers who would like to build relations with us.
I know it's a cliche, but diplomacy is the only way out. The other option is a long military standoff. And trust me, it won't just be Ukraine then. Russia is threatening to deploy nukes in Europe. NATO could do the same. How long before allies and middle powers join in? What's happening today is eerily similar to the Cold War. The same bluffs, the same threats, even the same actors. The only way out is for Biden and Putin to sit down and talk, to make concessions and to meet each other halfway. 2021 is a year of many firsts. America elected its first woman vice president. NASA touched the sun for the first time. Space tourism finally kicked off. New games were introduced at the Olympics. We saw the first sale of an NFT this year. Likewise, India's unicorn story also witnessed many firsts in 2021. The unicorn ecosystem saw a lot of new entries, like the first health tech unicorn. Innovaxer, the first social commerce unicorn, Meesho, and the first e-pharmacy unicorn, PharmEasy. For those of you wondering what a unicorn is, it's a term from the venture capital industry, first coined by Eileen Lee, the founder of Cowboy. She used the word unicorn to refer to any startup that is valued at $1 billion or more. Do you know how many such startups made it to India's unicorn club this year? 33. India added 33 unicorns in just 12 months. $33 billion companies. This is a massive record. One that's being lauded the world over. According to data compiled by the Hurun Research Institute, India is now the third top country to be hosting unicorns. India has a total of 54 unicorns. It has displaced the United Kingdom for the third spot. The UK added 15 unicorns in 2021. India now ranks ahead of the UK, also ahead of Germany, France, Israel, Canada, Brazil and South Korea. The United States tops this list, followed by China on the second spot and India the third. And this is just domestic data. Indians are now running a total of 119 unicorns the world over. 54 of them are in India, 65 outside the country. They're spread all over the world. There's Instacart, an on-demand delivery unicorn based in the US. Clip, a fintech unicorn based in Mexico. Improbable, a gaming unicorn based in the UK. Moglix, an e-commerce unicorn based in Singapore. Omio, an e-commerce unicorn based in Germany. All of these startups are either run by an Indian or have an Indian co-founder. Let's show you some more data. Back in India, Bengaluru is home to the highest number of unicorns. It ranks first among all Indian cities, followed by Mumbai, Pune, Thane and Gurugram. If we speak of Indian unicorns in terms of value, Byju's leads the pack at $21 billion. The company is now in talks for a public listing in the US, which, if successful, will take its value to $48 billion. InMobi, a mobile ad tech firm, is the second most valuable unicorn in India. It has a valuation of $12 billion. And Oyo Rooms, founded by 28-year-old Ritesh Agarwal, is on the third spot with a valuation of $9.4 billion. Among the new members of India's Unicorn Club are Digit, Cred, Urban Company, Zeta, BharatPay, CoinSwitch Kuber, Licious, MobiKwik, Miglam and others. You can say it's raining unicorns in India. What triggered this boom? What led to the rise of so many unicorns in this country? And that too during a pandemic when most businesses have collapsed. Industry experts point at three factors. One, a thriving digital payments ecosystem. It penetrated every aspect of life during the pandemic. A total of 44 billion digital payments were recorded this year, 44 billion. This helped startups expand their customer base. The second factor is a larger smartphone user base. With lockdowns and work from home becoming the norm, smartphones became more important than ever in our lives. India's smartphone market reached a record 173 million units in 2021. That's a 14% rise in just 1 year. And this made a lot of startups more accessible to Indians. Factor number 3, a digital-first business model. Almost every new startup in India is adopting the digital-first approach. It is tailored to a digital environment. It's personalized, technologically advanced. It prioritizes customer engagement and relies on data-driven strategies to expand. A confluence of all of these factors is driving India's unicorn boom. On an average, India is producing 3 unicorns a month. Reports say this figure is only going to grow in the coming year. Indian unicorns are showing a rare immunity against the Wuhan virus. They're proving to be resilient in the face of many economic perils. Well, here's hoping that their success stories further boost the Indian spirit of entrepreneurship. Speaking about immunity, the world is grappling with a massive surge of Omicron cases. This has triggered a big debate on booster shots. Should we be giving out boosters? Is it time for a third shot? I know it sounds like a no-brainer, but what do studies say? According to Oxford, a Covishield booster will protect you against Omicron. So will a Pfizer or Moderna. Basically, your third shot is your best shot against Omicron. Nobody is arguing with the science here. Most viruses do need booster shots. But most viruses are not causing pandemics, remember? So the question is, should we be thinking long term? Let me explain the point I'm making. Omicron is a mutation of the Wuhan virus. How do viruses mutate? by spreading. More infection equals more mutations. That's how it works. How do you break this cycle of mutations? By reducing infections, by immunizing more and more people. And that's where boosters come in. Around 20% of all jabs being administered today, 20% of them are boosters, which means 1 out of every 5 jabs given is a booster. That is simply not acceptable. Not when millions of people are yet to get their first shot. Take Africa, for instance, where Omicron was first discovered. The vaccination rate in Africa is 8%. In lower middle-income countries, it is 28%. These places are the breeding grounds for variants. You can blame vaccine inequity for that. The West hoarded vaccines. They refused to donate when it mattered. Do you remember what we told you earlier this year? America had enough jabs to vaccinate their people twice. Canada could do it 3 times over. Well, we thought that was just an interesting statistic, nothing more. But guess what? The West is actually doing it. They're vaccinating their people over and over again. The World Health Organization must also take some of the blame. Their messaging on boosters has been very confusing. Do we take it? Do we delay? There is no clarity from the WHO. Sometimes the WHO chief calls boosters a scandal. Sometimes he says it is okay for vulnerable populations. And sometimes he says you cannot boost your way out of the pandemic.
The global priority must be to support all countries to reach the 40% target as quickly as possible and the 70% target by the middle of this year. No country can boost its way out of the pandemic. And boosters cannot be seen as a ticket to go ahead with the planned celebrations without the need for other precautions.
So what's the issue here? The supply chains we know are working fine now. Vaccine production is not an issue. So what's the holdup? You see, the Western world has changed the goalpost. There is no other way to put it. First, 2 jabs were the norm. Now it's 3. Europe and North America want a good holiday season. They want to reopen their economies. They want to forget lockdown. So what do? They roll out boosters. The priorities and intentions are radically different this time. The first 2 jabs were about saving lives. The booster is about saving lifestyles. And now don't get me wrong, I'm not against boosters. In fact, all of us will have to get the 3rd shot at some point, or maybe even a 4th shot. The question is, it's not really if we should take a booster. The question is when we should take a booster. Is this the right time? In America, Joe Biden has ruled out curbs for Christmas. No restrictions. You can go out, meet your family or party with your friends. His entire plan hinges on boosters. And who can get boosters in America? Everyone who's more than 18 years in age. Same in Britain. No curbs for Christmas. Get your boosters and go out clubbing. Reports say Germany is planning to roll out a 4th jab. I understand the panic, I really do. Deaths are rising again, hospitals are reporting shortages, so a booster makes sense. But where are the social distancing rules? Like I said, vaccines are supposed to save lives, not lifestyles. So here's a better plan. Limit your boosters for the moment to frontline workers and vulnerable populations. The WHO is also pitching this plan. Yes, this will bring back some restrictions. Yes, your holidays will not be as fun, but at least people will be safe. At least we don't have to prepare for another mutation, another wave. Unfortunately, Western leaders are not listening. They're thinking about their economy, about their political prospects. Such short-sightedness got us into this mess in the first place. And at this rate, 2022 could be more of the same. We really hope it isn't. And here is why we have this booster debate going on. The Omicron variant, it has sparked panic across the world. More than 100 countries have confirmed cases of Omicron now. China is now on high alert. 13 million residents of Xi'an are under a lockdown. 52 new cases were detected there recently. So 13 million people are under lockdown. We don't know if these are Omicron cases in China, but they don't want to take chances. Look at these pictures. Hundreds of residents rushed to a shopping center. The lockdown orders led to panic buying. Why is China paranoid about this latest outbreak? Because it's looking at the West. The West is struggling with Omicron. Health systems in the US, France and Germany are considered the world's best. But they're not being able to deal with the latest surge in infections. There is a shortage of testing kits, hospital beds and even health professionals. Our next report tells you how Omicron is challenging the West.
Rapid tests are out of stock. There are long lines at testing sites. And hospitals are at breaking point. The United States is living through another pandemic nightmare. The Omicron variant is spreading fast, and the Biden administration is struggling to keep up. The biggest problem is the shortage of testing kits. They are out of stock at several pharmacies in America. Those who do manage to get one are paying through their nose. A pack of 2 rapid tests is being sold for $20. In some countries, the same test is sold for $1. President Joe Biden is facing tough questions. He admits there is a shortage of testing kits, but claims hospitals are in better shape compared to last year. That isn't the case in Minneapolis. According to a report, hundreds of people are waiting for emergency rooms to open up. Some hospital CEOs even took out this full-page ad recently. It was an appeal for help. The ad says, "We're heartbroken, we're overwhelmed." How does this happen in 2021? American allies in Europe are struggling too. A new wave of cases has overburdened French hospitals. A hospital in Mulhouse, doctors and nurses have reached breaking point. They are overwhelmed by a flood of cases.
The Mulhouse Hospital ICU is currently at full capacity as patients have been coming in for the past 20 days. 70% of the ICU patients are COVID-positive cases.
I must say that after 2 years in the same situation, to have a moment of respite like this summer, when we have fewer cases, it allowed us to catch our breath and think that maybe it was the light at the end of the tunnel. But in the end, no. The waves keep coming and hitting us, and the more it goes on, the more tired we get.
There is serious shortage of health workers in France. 7 out of 13 regions had to trigger emergency plans. Staff holidays have been cancelled. Reinforcements from the private sector are being called in to treat patients. The staffing crisis is affecting the capital city of Paris too. In the Greater Paris hospital system, about 1,000 nursing positions remain vacant. This has forced authorities to close 13% of their beds. Across France, 6% of all hospital beds are unavailable because of staff shortages. Germany is facing similar problems. ICUs in Germany could be operating at their peak capacity by Christmas. Hospitals may not be ready to handle new patients. German hospitals are struggling to operate all ICU beds. At almost 90% of the hospitals, there is staff shortage. The Western world's poor handling of the pandemic goes far beyond its borders. It can't even get vaccine donations right. In Nigeria, a bulldozer was called to destroy thousands of AstraZeneca shots. The Western nations gave them more than 1 million doses, but the shots had a shelf life of just a few weeks. They came too late, and then they expired. Nigeria had no choice but to destroy the entire stockpile. So far, most countries have relied on the West to dictate the global response. But their plans have failed to deliver, both at home and abroad. The latest Omicron surge shows the world needs a new and better playbook to end this pandemic. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
For our next story, let's take a step back from wars and pandemic. Let's focus on something more simple, human decency, the sense of what is right and what is wrong. Normally, it's a clear distinction, but sometimes people need a reminder. This story is from the Indian city of Haridwar. Last week, it hosted a conference of religious leaders. A short video has emerged from that meeting. I'm sure some of you have seen it on social media. We will not be playing it out tonight because it's vile, it's hateful, it is outrageous. It has no place in a civilized society, certainly not on our broadcast. There were a lot of threats made in that video, a lot of chest thumping. I will not go into the specifics, but I will tell you the gist. This video was basically a call to unleash genocide on Muslims to ethnically cleanse India's Muslim population. Now, normally, we wouldn't even cover a story like this. It's not geopolitics. It's not diplomacy. But this case is different. It speaks about what we may be becoming as a society. Have we normalized hate speech? Have political leaders given up on their responsibilities? And here's why I ask, because I'm not hearing condemnations. Political parties are distancing themselves from this video, all of them. They do not want to comment on it. They want to pretend like it's some random, isolated incident. It is. But for it to not become a pattern, it's important to speak up. Hate speech is wrong, plain and simple. It doesn't matter who's doing it or where you're doing it. Hate speech cannot be justified. Earlier this week, we had another incident in Amritsar. A man was lynched at the Golden Temple after he committed sacrilege. Two parts to this incident. First, the sacrilege, second, the lynching. And let me make it clear, both are wrong. But the reaction was radically different. Every political party condemned the sacrilege. The lynching, not even one. Not a single party condemned the lynching. Is this what our society has come to? There are laws to deal with hateful elements. There are courts to punish them. Citizens cannot take the law into their own hands. If they do, politicians cannot endorse them, should not endorse them. And for the record, in cases like these, silence is guilt. We told you about two incidents tonight, two different states, two different crimes. Do you know what's common? Both states are going to polls next year. No political party wants to offend any community, so they turn a blind eye to blatant hate. And this is a slippery slope. I agree these are fringe elements. They don't represent the real India. But if political leaders continue to be silent, these fringes will crawl into the mainstream, which is why they must react. Calling for genocide is not okay. Demanding ethnic cleansing is not okay. Lynching is not okay. These so-called religious leaders may not be politicians. They may not belong to any political party, but that does not justify their silence. Our politicians can comment on controversies in cricket. They can talk about Hollywood and foreign affairs. Surely they can spare a moment here. Just a simple condemnation. Is that too much to ask? Just to send the message across that hate speech is not okay, that it will not be tolerated in India. Societies, are not judged by their faults or their mistakes. They are judged by their reaction to mistakes. If Indian leaders across the political spectrum can condemn this, if they can bring these hate mongers to justice, then decency would have triumphed over hate. Think about it. To the United States now, where airlines and telecom companies are at loggerheads. They're sparring over a planned 5G rollout. Airline operators say this rollout will lead to 350,000 flight delays every year. 350,000 flights. They fear that 5G frequencies will disrupt their networks, causing delays, diversions and cancellations. Which airlines are these? Which telecom companies are they fighting with? And are 5G networks really unsafe for flights? Our next report explores.
A lot has been said about the 5G revolution, how it will change our lives for the better, bring incredible speeds to our mobiles, enhance online streaming services, and make driverless cars a common sight. These are all changes we've been told to expect, courtesy 5G networks. Here's one they never said. 350,000 flight delays every year. This warning has been issued by airline executives in the United States. They say cell phone frequencies due to 5G could delay, divert or cancel nearly 350,000 flights each year. That's 4% of all annual flights in the United States. The concerns stem from a planned 5G expansion in the country. Two American telephone companies, AT&T and Verizon, are planning to roll out their C-band 5G services in January next year. Airline executives say these services will disrupt their networks. This includes David Calhoun, the CEO of Boeing, and Jeffrey Knittel, the CEO of Airbus, two of the largest airplane companies in the world. They've both written to U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg asking him to delay the rollout of 5G services. What exactly do they fear could happen? They say frequencies stemming from the 5G service have the potential of damaging an important aircraft instrument. The radio altimeter, also known as the radar altimeter, is the device that measures a plane's altitude above the ground. It's critical in guiding pilots during landings. Boeing and Airbus say that if phones using 5G frequencies don't stay in airplane mode, they can interfere with the radio altimeters, as can 5G towers located near airports and runways, in the case of bad weather or fog, which has already set in across America. This can make landing even more risky. What do the service providers say? They say no such disruptions will occur. They say the aviation industry is fear-mongering. They point at 5G operations in 40 other countries, which they claim haven't caused any delays or disruptions so far. But they failed to mention the limits each country has imposed on 5G frequencies. We haven't heard the end of this story. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
It's been a while since we talked about Iran. The Islamic Republic is mostly in the news for its nuclear programs or for its absolutely bizarre laws sometimes. A few days back, it introduced a law which prohibited women from eating pizzas on air. Don't ask me why. Now it has come up with another perplexing piece of legislation, a law to ban pets. I'm not making this up. Iran is seriously mulling a nationwide ban on household pets. It's a bizarre law with an extremely and equally bizarre name. It's called Protection of Public's Rights Against Animals. This law was proposed by at least 75 hardline legislators last month. That's 1/4 of all lawmakers in the Iranian parliament. They want to ban Iranians from buying, selling, transporting, driving, walking or keeping pets. They've left no space for loopholes just in case you were looking for one. All of this is banned. Why are they against pets? The hardliners describe living with animals as a quote-unquote destructive social problem, as a danger to human life. What makes them think so? Apparently the growing instances of people being attacked by stray animals. Which instances? This they did not mention. They also say that keeping pets is un-Islamic, that it amounts to kufr or blasphemy. Does it really? Well, it's a heavily debated topic, one that stems from the human interpretation of Islamic texts. Different people look at it differently. I'm not going to get into that debate. What I can tell you is that the explanation given by the Iranian lawmakers to justify their move is rather bizarre. Allow me to quote from what they said. Keeping pets could gradually change the Iranian way of life by replacing human and family relationships with feelings and emotional relationships towards animals. Now, first of all, this is hogwash. Secondly, how is having an emotional relationship with an animal a problem? In which universe did it replace human and family relationships? If anything, having a pet only strengthens families. I don't even need to be saying this. Also, which animals, according to these lawmakers, pose a danger to society? They've named quite a few. 3 of them stand out: cats, dogs, and rabbits. These animals, if the lawmakers are to be believed, can apparently destroy societies. It gets more bizarre. If the bill is passed and Iranians are found in possession of any of these animals, they can end up in legal trouble. Their pets will be confiscated. They will have to pay a fine that would be 10 to 30 times the minimum monthly working wage in Iran. It's true what they say. Fundamentalism makes people do outrageous things. It makes people hate one another, makes them hate one another's religion. And now we have fundamentalists making people hate cats and rabbits. I'm going to wrap the show with that, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
كيفك شو اخبارك؟ كل سنه وانتم طيبين.